That's pretty much what the justice said. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Whoa.
What was that, Fred?
That
was funny.
I am.
Next to Gary. Here.
Okay, somebody else.
Yep. Clear cutting.
Thank you.
Right, so get going.
What, just one second.
Okay. Let me know, Sylvia, when you're ready.
All right, thank you.
Now.
That's nice. Oh.
Peter, you know what, on Friday, that didn't work.
Who is that? Oh,
No,
I
it's,
got it.
wasn't an issue.
DJ.
Yeah.
What do you do to the three? No, they already got numbers. But the other thing is. It was almost really like, oh, that's retired.
All we need is Barbara to. You got on me now. No?
And I mean, look.
Okay.
The letter.
Somewhere else. Yes. All right, I think I'm as ready as I can be right now.
First time I've ever seen my name.
All right, let's get going if everybody's ready. We can call to order the Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting for December 17th. There's no edits to the minutes. I'd like to call for motion for action on those minutes. Motion to move. Second. Got that one there? All right, Cynthia, roll call.
All right, let's do it. Auburn, we have Chris Sterndale.
Aye.
From Bedford, we have Bill Jean,
Present, and yes.
and Mark Snyder's also here today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Candy, we have Ron Labrador.
Aye. Yes, and I.
Thank you, Ron. Chester, we have Andrew Haddock,
Present, and yes.
Deb Munson,
Here and
from Deerfield, Fred McGarry,
Here and yes.
they're enjoying his meal, from Derry, Richard Tripp,
here and yes.
and Jeff Moulton is also on virtual.
Here and yes.
Excellent, thank you. And Francistown, we have Gary Schneckenberg.
Present and abstain.
All right. Goffstown, virtually, we have Jacob LaFontaine
Here and abstain.
and Colleen Mayu.
Here and yes.
No one yet from Hooksett. And in case anyone does know someone from Hooksett, please encourage them to join the commission. Just a side advertisement. Londonderry, we have Art Rugg.
I'm here, and yes, I'll be at this.
And I don't think anyone else, from Manchester.
Yeah, Deb.
Yep.
Levin's been present.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There you are in my glare spot. Thanks, Deb. Deb Levins from Londonderry. Thank you. Let's see. Manchester, we have Peter Capano,
Here and yes.
Ray Clement,
Here and yes.
Dan O'Neill,
Here and yes.
and Eliza Augusta.
Here and yes.
And.
Did I miss someone?
Oh.
Oh, Kevin Shepherd. And just so you know, since you're so close, I'm not sick. I just traveled. So this is courtesy masking. All right, New Boston, we have Mark Sunan
Here and yes.
and Ellen Campbell.
Here and yes.
Perfect. We don't have anyone from Ware. Is that correct? All right. Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin
Here and abstain.
and Ed Lapointe.
Here and yes.
And online, we have DJ Withy.
Here and yes.
Thanks, DJ. Also from DOT online, we have Lucy St. John.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lucy St. John, abstain.
Thank you, Lucy. And just to recognize our non-voting member, we have Jack Wade on virtual.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And I think aside from staff,
So did you get Jen Badney?
Jennifer Vadney from Francistown.
I am here and yes on the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good catch, Bill. All right. Anyone else I missed? Okay. Oh,
When
well,
we dive into new
not
business, so
just a visitor. We have a
we
visitor.
have a visitor.
Yeah. And if we have visitor and presenter, yeah, we will talk about that later.
For all of those of you that are virtual, I'm sorry, but I want to just thank Linda and the team for bringing in a special lunch for us today.
All right.
Wow. Further ado, new business, overview of the proposed 2025 regional safety performance targets. Dave Tilton, the transportation planner, and I guess we'll be joined by Zach.
And I can tell you, as Dave and Zach said, if you think this is gonna be a dull thing because of performance measures, think again. This is a very, very interesting presentation. I'm even excited my second time around.
I apologize. Can't remember if there's anybody in here who's already seen this said stuff. Oh. You can rank my performance. You have to do it a couple times to get a Tony.
Every year it exceeds the previous year.
There we go. Let's build the anticipation.
I,
All right, excuse me, do I get this going the wrong way? All right, can everyone see that at home in full screen?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Let me get rid of these. All right, good morning, everyone. Today, Zach and I are presenting on the 2025 PM safety performance measures. This is informational only. There'll be no action required for you guys today. All right, so all of the performance measures fall under the scope of transportation performance management, which uses system information to make policy decisions and investments. And under the requirements of the FAST Act, DOTs are required to measure and report performances in these 5 areas. Some, such as safety, which we'll be talking about today, are done every year. Other ones, such as pavement and bridge, are done every 4 years. So under the PM1 safety performance measures, these are the 5 federally required safety measures that need to be looked at and voted upon. Number and rate of fatalities, number and rate of serious injuries, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. I won't go into the definitions. Zach will be doing a much deeper dive of all of this in the upcoming slides. So the way this process works is the states set the performance targets. They're then handed down to the MPOs, and the MPOs have a couple of different options. They can adopt the state targets, they can set their own regional targets, or they can do a combination of the first two. For 2025, SNHPC is recommending doing the combination of adopting regional targets for all measures except for the non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. For that measure, we recommend adopting the state target. And I'll turn this over to Zach to go into the data.
As Sylvia mentioned, we have to do this every year, so it could, and I think that was either my 6th or 7th time doing this presentation. So if we try to spice it up a little bit by giving you some more context and diving deeper into the issues. So let's dig in. 2023. This is the SNHP fatalities and serious injuries. We had 25 fatalities and 104 serious injuries. For the new people, a serious injury is, this is the definition. I'm not going to read it because it's actually fairly graphic, but it is not, broke your nose because the airbag went off, or you have hurt your neck a little bit. These are serious, potentially life-altering injuries. Important to note here that those fatalities, according to the National Highway Transportation Safety Agency, what's it stand for? fatalities cost the region 47 million and that year, and serious injuries cost 121. Do the math real quick there. You can see that's about a little less than 2 million for a fatality and a little more than 1 for a serious injury. And that has to do with a whole bunch of stuff. And it's you can see there that it's mostly not the vehicle. The vehicle is not the most important thing there. It's the person. And that's what really costs a lot. In just give an idea of how this is shifted onto society, that cost. In New Hampshire, I want to say bodily injury liability minimum is between 25 and 50,000. So you can see that doesn't cover clearly anything close to this. In Germany, body liability is 7.5 million euros. So in that case, and they have free healthcare. So the breakdown here, we had about 60% of them were fatalities were vehicles, about a quarter were motorcycles, and 16% were pedestrians. And if you compare that to serious injuries, you can see that motorcycles and pedestrians are overrepresented in fatalities, which makes sense. It's a lot safer inside a car than you are outside it. But this is just 1 year. Oh, actually, do this first. Where did the fatalities and serious injuries occur? 20% of fatalities occurred on limited access expressway. That means 80% of them occurred on roads that we hypothetically have some kind of jurisdiction over. For serious injuries, it was 15% and 85%. Looking at 3 years here, we have 2021 to 2023 fatalities, again on the left at 75, serious injuries at 337. Again, you can see that motorcycle and pedestrian are overrepresented compared to serious injuries just because it's more dangerous outside the car, but about a half of them were vehicles. If we break down into just Manchester, we see a different breakdown where now pedestrian and motorcycle are making up about a third of all the fatalities. And again, not quite as many, but also overrepresented in the serious injuries.
And Zach, for everyone, OHV.
Is off-road.
Highway.
Yeah. So if you around here, it's illegal to drive an ATV on a public road, but if you are doing it and you die, you're recorded. If we look at not Manchester, we can see that the vast majority of the fatalities and all the serious injuries were motorized. Only 4% were vulnerable road users, which by DOT's definition is people walking, biking in a stroller on a personal conveyance, that sort of thing. Let's make it clear, in Manchester, it's about a third and 25% serious injuries. So seeing very different pattern in terms of VRU crashes. And I'm going to dig into that for a little bit because I have actual locations for serious injuries in Manchester for VRU crashes because they're a smaller subset. And I went and researched them. For reasons I won't get into, we don't have serious injury or good crash data from the Manchester Police Department. It just has to do with the way they report the state, stuff gets lost. So we only have, in this case, serious injuries. But here we can see where they occur within the region based on the census tracts. And this is excluding pedestrian deaths that occur on limited access expressways. Somebody who's changing a tire gets hit. Somebody who's working construction gets hit. That's something serious. And we want to avoid that, but that's going to be a totally different problem than somebody walking across the street. We look at just the heat map of it. You can see that it's concentrated in downtown and the center city, Manchester. The VR rate and serious injury crash rate per capita is 8 times higher within our equity area than it is in the rest of the region.
What's an equity is?
So the equity area was a area that we designated based on 6 different factors of people who have been underserved by the transportation system. And previously, and it ended up being this. It wasn't set out to do it, basically being the center city, downtown Manchester. The rate of VRU fatal and serious injury crashes per capita in Manchester is twice as high as it is in Nashville. So this is a very particular Manchester specific problem. How are we doing as a region overall? Well, the answer is not great, but neither is the country. You can see there, this is the 5-year average number of fatalities in the region, and then that for the United States, and they're both indexed at 100 for 2011. You can see that we bottomed out in about 2014, and we've been rising since, and we're rising faster than the national average. Why is that? Well, part of it is that just driving is dangerous. It's probably the most dangerous thing all of us do every day, and we don't really think about it. And it's become much, much safer than it once was, but it still is, one of the most dangerous activities. Worldwide, 1.3 million people are killed in traffic crashes annually. 102 are injured. Traffic crash fatalities is the 8th leading cause of death worldwide. You can see that if we look at jobs. So here we have 2022 U.S. civilian occupation fatality rates per 100,000 worker. At the top there, tree trimmer, pruners, and loggers, by far the most dangerous job. And then it goes down to roofers. This all makes sense. If you're working around trees, you're working up high, it's more dangerous. But you see here that heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers have a much higher rate than police and sheriff patrol officers, which is a job that we traditionally think of as being dangerous. And compared to my job, it is obviously, but it's not compared to a truck driver. And I'll just make the social commentary that you can see below there that refuse and recyclable material collectors is about the same as police officers. So trashmen face a fatality rate about the same as police. And which one of those two occupations sees the same, those two occupations see the same pension and pay benefits. In 2022, motor vehicle operator occupations had a fatality rate 57% higher than police and sheriff patrol officers. And keep in mind that the sheriff patrol police fatality rate also includes fatalities that might have happened on the job while driving. And it's actually worse when we start to look at it, us versus the rest of the world. On the left there is road fatalities per 100,000 residents. I have there the United States, Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. And you can see that not only were we much higher going back than the rest, but everybody else is going down, and starting about a couple of years ago, we started going back up again. It's even worse if we look at other countries. So here's South Korea, Greece, and Portugal. And in 1999, the fatality rate in South Korea was twice as high as it was in the US. Now it's about 1/3. Over that 30-year period, other countries have learned how to get their fatality rates down. How are we doing in New Hampshire? So this is New Hampshire deaths per 100,000. You see there that vehicles in red, firearm is in black. So now you're about as likely to be killed by a firearm as you are a vehicle in New Hampshire. Things like influenza and pneumonia are coming down. I don't know why exactly that is, but you can see drowning which is something we think of, swimming can be dangerous, and it can be, but the drowning rate is much lower than either of those two. So what are the factors driving this? We're going to try to dig into this because there's not one answer. It's actually a bunch of different things, and sometimes they contradict each other. Sometimes they point in different directions, and I don't have a lot of answers for all of it, but besides the fact that it's complicated. So here, we know alcohol and impaired driving is obviously a factor. So this is the U.S. all percentage, looking at all the percentage of all fatality rates that had a BAC of 0.8 or higher, and those that were somewhere measurable but not zero. You can see that back in 1982, when they started measuring this countrywide, we were about 50%. Now we're down to about 30, and we've kind of been there. So about 30% of all fatalities involve somebody who's over the limit. I just did a quick check before the meeting just to see where is the 0.08 BAC compared to the rest of the world. Well, there's only one country that has higher, which I believe was Palau, at like 0.09 or something, 0.09. Most of the developed Western countries were about 0.05 to 0.02. What's it look like in New Hampshire? Now, this is for 2021 fatalities, and 2021 was a weird year where we saw a lot of destructive behaviors, people speeding, people drinking and driving at much higher levels than we typically do. So this is probably not the best example, but this is what I have. You can see that about a quarter had a BAC twice the limit. And then another, no, I don't know what that is. Small, the green portion there is those who are over the limit, but not out, but not at double the limit. So about a third in New Hampshire were over the limit in the fatalities, which is what we see nationwide. Okay, how does distracted driving count for this? The best I can find is that there's the National Occupant Protection Use Survey, or NOPUS, which essentially is they just send people out and watch people in their cars, and if they're doing using electric devices. So this is the percentage of drivers observed using electronic devices during daylight hours. The blue there is talking on the cell phone. You see that's going down. The green is manipulating a handheld device, presumably a cell phone. So it's going up, but it's not huge. We're not talking about huge numbers. And other countries have cell phones too. How does enforcement play into it? I know anecdotally, I've seen a lot less enforcement in recent years. And if you look at major US cities, you can see that as well. So this is the change in traffic stop volume in major cities. And everybody drops in 2020 and just stays there. We also have a uniquely American problem, and that's that our cars are bigger and more deadly than other places. The fatality rate is roughly 7 times higher when colliding with a heavy pickup truck than it is with a compact car. And as the weight of your car increases, the risk of killing others also increases dramatically. The economists found that even after controlling for the curb weight of one's own car, getting hit by an additional 1,000 pounds of steel and aluminum, roughly the difference between a Toyota Camry and a Ford Explorer, boosts the likelihood of death by 66%. And this is an issue because we're not making smaller cars, we're making bigger cars. This is the percent of vehicles produced in the US by year. And this is all cars, which is all cars and kind of car SUV, which is a smaller thing. And then all trucks is light duty trucks, SUVs, vans. And you can see that, back in 1975, trucks accounted for less than 25% production. Yes?
So is there any metrics on electric vehicles that due to weight and?
They would, one of the shortcomings of an electric vehicle is they're heavier. So I haven't seen anything on that, but hypothetically, if you get hit, if you had the choice to be hit by a Hummer or an e-Hummer, you would choose the Hummer. Still not a great choice.
Don't keep that in mind.
Yeah, but yeah, so and if you go back to 1975, or like one of my favorite movies is the Blues Brothers. And if you're familiar with that movie, they're famous for crashing like 175 police cars in that movie. And they were all, sedans. What do police cars look like today? Manchester Police Department aren't driving old black and white. And not just that, our cars in general have gotten bigger. So here's the F-150. The blue one is the model in the 70s, and the white is the current version. You can see the front end is much bigger. It's much taller. The clearance is about the same, though. And why does this matter? Oh, it's gotten so bad that I've started to see memes about it, actually. Why does this matter? Well, studies have shown that vehicles with tall and blunt and tall and sloped medium height, blunt front ends, there's a glare, were associated with significant increases of 43.6%, 45%, and 26% in pedestrian fatality risks, respectively, when compared with low and sloped front ends. When you get hit by a car, what typically happens is it strikes you in the legs and you land on the hood. Now that's going to be pretty awful, but it doesn't, it's not the first blow is not on your major internal organs. When you get hit by a truck, it hits either your chest or your head, depending if you're really short, and you get dragged underneath the vehicle. And so a 4-inch increase in the front end height is associated with a 22% increase in pedestrian risk fatalities. And this has real world consequences. A couple of years ago, about 5-minute walk from here, a 4-year-old was on his bike in an alley and got hit by a truck and died. The driver was not speeding. The driver was not drunk. But if you look at, he was driving a GMC Sierra, which weighs about 5,000 pounds and is about 6 foot tall. This is where he's driving. It's one way, or I'm sorry, it's a one lane, and you can't talk a little hard to that there's an alley right there, and he was turning right out of that alley, and the kid was playing there. In likelihood, he couldn't see the kid because he was so high, and the front end was so high, and the kid was 4 years old and down low. And that leads to vehicles like this. If you haven't seen this, this is one of the new designs for USPS vehicles, and we can all agree that it's objectively weird looking. But it has a lot of reasons for this decision. As I've mentioned, hood height matters. So here you can see it's a low sloping hood. So if you are driving around the neighborhood and you hit someone, there's minimal harm. Also has a big windshield, so you can see the this isn't very aerodynamic. You probably wouldn't want to take this across country, or even if you were working in a rural area. But if you're stopping every 20 feet for mailboxes, it doesn't matter how aerodynamic it is. Also, it has AC. So just keep in mind that mail workers in Atlanta have been working all this time without AC in their car. Okay, what about transit? You say, how could transit play into our fatality rates? Well, one is that in general, a bus is much safer than driving. So here is past U.S. fatality rates 2016 to 19 averages. Deaths per 1 million passenger miles. A passenger mile is just moving one person 1 mile. You can see there that for a passenger vehicle, it's about 0.48. For a bus, it's about 0.01. You are 50 times more likely to die while in an automobile than you are riding a bus. And you can see that when you get out to airplane, it's virtually nothing. But that also, keep in mind, that's only scheduled flights. It's not you out in your little biplane out there. To quote a professor at UC Denver, civil engineering professor at UC Denver, the overall research suggests that on average, a 1% rise in transit mode equates to nearly a 3% drop in traffic deaths per population. Transit is about 20 times safer in terms of fatalities and severe injuries than driving, but yet, for whatever reason, we never saw transit as a safety feature. Is it that we have more cars than other places? We are a car culture country. So in 2000, in the last 2016 to 18 and 2020, it's a number of different years. In the US, there were about 80 cars for every 100 persons, which is probably the most you're going to see worldwide. But it's not that much higher than Italy. Italy is 70 cars per person. They still have lots of cars in Italy, but they have much better rates than we do. In general, wealthy countries in general just have more cars. Certain wealthy countries with a reputation for cycling and few cars, such as the Netherlands, still have many more cars per person than most countries do. There are more cars in the Netherlands than in Nigeria, despite Nigeria population being 12 times greater. We think of
Do you have anything that puts in the context of how many miles are driven?
one sec, yeah. And so they have lots of cars. We think of the Dutch as riding their bicycles everywhere and then getting in a gondola. And that's true. They do a lot of that, but they also have a lot of cars because they're wealthy countries. So what's a major difference is how much we drive. So here we have vehicle miles traveled per capita. The US is there in red. And then we have Australia, the Netherlands, Great Britain, Japan, Sweden, and Czech Republic. And you can see that historically, we've been way higher in miles driven than other places. And you can say, well, it's a big country, we're rural, got places to go. Well, Australia drove 30% less than Americans in 2019. And Australia has a population density less than 1 in 10 of that of the United States. So Australia is less dense than the US and they drive significantly less than us. Well, you can then make the counter argument, Zach. Australia, everybody lives along the coast because the inland is an arid desert where nobody wants to live unless you're a cattle rancher. Okay, that's true.
CIA actually the data source for this?
It was for the I want to say the population. Yeah, because they have a CIA. If you ever want to, the CIA fact book. It's actually a very good resource. Say, Zach, America looks like this. this is a street view near my uncle's property in central Washington, where his family's farm is 5 miles from his nearest neighbor. We're out there, he's on the Rattlesnake Hills, and now we're looking at the Horse Heaven Hills. Well, I'd make the counter argument that, yeah, a lot of America looks like this, but that's not where Americans live. More than twice as many people live in black as in the gray. You know, where people in America are these big metro areas. In particular, there's the Northeast Corridor, also sometimes called the Acela Corridor, or the Boswash Corridor, because it runs from Washington to Boston. Almost 50 million people live in the black here. If it was its own state, it'd be the biggest state by 10 million people. Here we are at the top. When I was looking at that, it reminded me of the what is the Tai-Hai-Yo Belt. Probably not something you're familiar with, but unless you know Japan. But in Japan, the majority of people live in an area stretching from Tokyo out past Hiroshima, basically along the coast there. And if you compare it to the Northeast Corridor, it's very similar. Both these maps are at the same scale. So let's look at how these two countries, what their transportation system looks like and the results are. The distance between Boston to Washington is 520 miles. The distance from Tokyo to Hiroshima is 520 miles, just by chance. Travel from Boston to Washington, the best you could ever hope to get is about 7 hours and 20 minutes. That's you leave Sunday night during the night, you hit no traffic, you hit no construction, you don't stop, you don't drive, below the speed limit. That's the best you could do. If you wanted to do that by train, it'd take you about 7 hours. The closest thing we have to a high-speed train in North America is the Acela, which runs between Boston and Washington. It doesn't actually run at high speeds for most of its track, because the track is too old and it hasn't been straightened. Tokyo to Hiroshima, travel time by car, 9 hours and 46 minutes. Travel by train, 4 hours. So it's it's about half the time travel that same distance by train. How we do in fatalities? Well, in 2023, America had about 41,000 fatalities, or 12.2 deaths per 100,000. Japan had 2,700, or about 2.2 deaths per 100,000. So what's that? 5.5 times lower. Okay. Now we're going to actually get into the safety measures themselves. I'm going to pass this back to Dave 1 second. Yeah.
I saw alcohol related. Has anybody looked at cannabis related?
Yes, and so when you do I don't know if they did for this study, but if you go into the actual FARS database, which is the database that tracks fatalities nationwide, there is a tab for drugs use or high or whatever. It's much less widely uniform because they don't have like a standard test for whether somebody there's no blood alcohol level for weed, which is the major difference.
All right, so we included this slide to partly show that, the concept of trying to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways is something that's shared nationwide and through multiple programs. So the Safe Streets for All, which is a program that SHPC is doing collaboratively with other MPOs in the state, the purpose of this program is to reduce with an eventual elimination of fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway. And one component of their action plan is a commitment by a public organization, in this case, an MPO, of getting to an aspirational goal of 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway. The chart over here to our left shows SNHPC adopting this with having our fatalities and serious injuries by 2035 with an aspirational goal of 0 serious injuries and fatalities on our roadways by 2050.
So previously, all the guidance we've gotten from federal highways is don't be aspirational in your goals. Be realistic. We've now gotten through the SS4A program, we now get the goal, be aspirational. So That's what we're gonna do. And I can tell you, having been on a number of webinars with MPOs across the country, everybody's doing something different. Some people are being very conservative and some people are being totally aspirational. They're all over the place. So the first measure here is the number of fatalities. In red, you can see the 5-year average. That's what we actually had. And the X there is with our target. So, for between 2019 and 2021, we were pretty close. And then in 2022 and 2023, it starts creeping up there. Not sure if that's going to continue. That might just be some of the delay from higher deaths during the pandemic. We don't know. We're going to have to see. But if we want to meet our own target, we have to then adopt our target, which is that orange one there. And just for comparison, the state's target is there in blue. So this is projected fatality rate. This is the number of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And VMT, or vehicles miles traveled, it's just one vehicle moving 1 mile. That's all it is. Here we can see, again, our numbers in red, and then the targets are the crosses. And you can see that between 2019 and 2021, we adopted the states, and it was coming in consistently higher than we got. And so in 2022, we decided we're going to adopt our own regional rate. And again, you can see that it's closer, although in the last year, it's now starting to crawl up there. So I'm not sure what's really going to happen there. But our target is, again, the orange dot there, and the state's target is the blue one. This is the number of serious injuries. You can see that we've been pretty flat along there, and as such, pretty close to our targets. And going out, looking out and projecting into 2025, we're adopting our own target, and it's actually not that far off from what you would expect if we extrapolate it out. So we'll see. The serious injury one is less aspirational at this point than the fatalities. Serious injuries per 100 VMT. Again, you can see it's pretty flat there, and we've been, pretty much on the mark. Again, state's target in blue, our orange target in orange, our target in orange. So this is projected number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. You can see that this is kind of more all over the place. The target changes a fair bit year to year, and that's just based on the fact that the number is lower, and there's some inherent volatility within that. This is one where we're going to adopt the state's target, because it turns out that the state's target is more ambitious than ours. And so that we didn't want to say we're going to adopt a higher target if the state's already proposing one lower. But that could change next year or the year after that. I think we're back to you, Dave.
Yep. Thank you. All right. And so here we have a slide kind of summarizing the 2025 state level safety performance. Over here to the left, we have the 5 safety measures that Zach has been discussing. And here we have the 5-year rolling average for 2018 and 2019. To the right, we have our trends, recent and desired. Now, we can see that at the state level, all 3 out of the 5 measures have decreased, which is exactly what we would want to see the numbers start to do for a lower level of fatalities. We did see a noticeable increase in number and rate of serious injuries at the state level. So that will be something that we'll have to continue to monitor. And over to the right, we have the state targets. These are expressed as decimal points since they are averages. And here we have a similar table. This is at the SNHPC regional level. So we have, once again, our regional 5-year rolling averages for 2018 and 2019. Now we can see one of the big differences at the regional level versus the state level is we saw an increase in 4 out of the 5 measures. The only one we did not see an increase was the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, which remained flat. To the right of our trends, we have the state targets, and then we have the SNHPC recommended targets. And as we've mentioned earlier, we're recommending that we adopt a regional target for 4 out of the 5 safety measures and support the state target for the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. I'd also like to point out that the number on the outside for the fatalities, the 116.2, that is our regional state target. And the number inside the parentheses, the 20.4 for the fatalities, that is our regional share of that larger target. And here we have a summary table of the chart that Zach showed earlier, all together with our fatalities, fatality rates, serious injury and rate, and bike ped fatalities and serious injuries, showing how close we are from the actual numbers to the targets that were projected. As Zach mentioned, once, a couple of years ago, we started setting more regional targets. We've increased the accuracy of some of these targets. And then we have the one summary slide to bring it all together. The safety measures on the left-hand side. The first column on the left under the 2025 is the state targets. To the right of that is our regional targets. And then under the action is the recommended actions that SNHPC recommends, which once again is adopting regional targets for 4 out of the 5 measures and supporting the state target for the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. And with that, we can open the floor to any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Zach, any questions?
I have a question.
Let's see if I can get
I
that.
wanted to talk about the overall fatality number on an annual basis worldwide. I think you said that it was 1.3 million.
Correct.
It sounds like a huge number, given that this country, I think we also saw about 40,000. That sounds about right annually. Why is it 1.3 worldwide? And the US rate is higher than most of the industrial.
It's really that being driven by crash rates in the third world. It's
Okay.
really what is the rates are much higher in the global south than they are, just as the rates have plummeted in Europe, they're skyrocketing in places like Africa, even though there are far fewer cars there. But there's not the there's no
India,
New
Delhi, and
I mean, well, you think of any third world nation and then picture the street where they're driving around.
Little buses.
Little-
Yeah, what they drive.
Yeah, there, so you got a person on a rickshaw driving a bus, like next to, a guy on a bike, and they're all moving around without traffic control,
okay, thank you.
So, this, looking at these statistics helps us, I don't mean this in a negative way, it helps us admire a problem, right? I mean, we can look at the problem and say, wow, that's not good. Do we have the ability to relate to this actions that have been taken? We talk about target means it suggests that the target is something we can or want to achieve by taking actions. So is there anything that relates to the actions taken and outcomes?
Yeah, so there are a series of transportation policies that countries that have seen much better results took. And they're basically started in Sweden in the 90s, I want to say. And in general, they're called the SAFEs. How did I forget?
Safe systems approach.
Thank you. Good to have an engineer in the room. At the federal level, there's been some movement towards some of those measures. Whether they're genuine or whether they'll continue, we'll see. But there's things like that are now ubiquitous in other countries that are not found in New Hampshire, like automated enforcement. Automated enforcement, so automated red light and speeding enforcement. Yeah, you do see them in some different states, and some cities have them, but they're everywhere in other countries. And that's one way to handle it. It's not going to solve all your problems. If somebody's driving drunk, that doesn't solve the problem, but that solves a portion of it.
Is there any correlation between statistics, high statistics in those states that have little or no public transportation as opposed to other states that have more of a variety of transportation?
I haven't seen that, but I can say anecdotal. I can say that the worst offending states are states in the Sun Belt. So in general, they're going to be states that developed later, are more car centric. So Florida is the worst state in terms of pedestrian fatalities, even though you can make some correlation there that New York has significantly fewer per capita than Phoenix.
So the more we reach road centered, then you're going to have these figures just continue to decline.
Yes.
Great presentation, good information. I'm an engineer as well. It's interesting, you get all these facts and these goals, but what are we, the government, actually doing to prevent this? I mean, you see funding for new roads, you see funding for paving, you see funding, but what do we actually, we're not encouraging people to the alternative sources, train, bikes, or, Right, smaller cars. I mean, what we're doing is we're creating infrastructure for these larger vehicles, but we're not really looking at alternatives to see, so it's more of a statement on my part, being past public works, we're encouraging people to use these sources, but we're not doing anything and putting the proper funding to see. My,
In general, in this country, engineer, every engineer you'll ask, it's safety first. And, or in every, transportation plan is safety first, but you look at where we put the money, not necessarily always true.
I would pipe in on that and just say that, here at the MPO, we have two functions that should have influence over that. One of those is the Transportation Improvement Plan, and the other is Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And essentially, there's supposed to be linkages between these performance measures and the kind of programming that we do with our transportation improvements in the region. And so part of what you're learning here today should be applied to future prioritization of improvements in the region.
That said, right on that point, that, for all of our all the projects that we prioritize, I believe safety is the highest measure, or has the highest weight of any of the topics in there. But we allocate what, $10.2 million every 2 years, and then some TAPS funds and stuff. In terms of the overall transportation network, we're a drop. So how much can we do?
Thank you. Very great presentation. I'll be selling my Chevy pickup this afternoon.
I don't. My first car was a Dodge Ram, and I
drove
love
a Camry for like 10 or 12 years. But, living in Manchester, is it fair to either our sister communities in the MPO that Manchester be mixed with them, or vice versa? Because they're really two different fruits or something. I'm picturing downtown Derry with some similar, but is it fair to mix everything together, the urban communities with the very rural communities?
Typically, when I'm doing an analysis, I'll break it out into 3 different categories. One is Manchester, which just sits alone on its own, and then I put all the towns that are over 10,000, which is Derry, Londonderry, Hooksett, Goffstown, Bedford. Apologies if I'm forgetting anybody, and then there's everybody under 10,000, and that you can typically see that there are a natural classes within those classifications. I didn't do that for this one. I have done it for past one, but I might not have shared it.
More of a comment, but especially when you were talking about large cars, I was hit by a car on my bike, and the woman could not see me over the SUV, just kept driving into me until part of her car popped off, and that's how she knew that I was there. So these are really real things that people deal with. When we're looking at statistics, and that's hard to see, but I think it's really important that we think about people behind those statistics as well.
There's a number of videos out there from local news. This, for whatever reason, this became a local news story that all these different stations picked up, where they would take a truck or an SUV and then have kids sit on the ground in front of it, see how it took 10 kids whatever out before you could actually see them. And that's a problem that actual tractor trailers happen. I've seen the tractor trailer hit somebody because he thought the intersection had cleared during that signal change, and it hadn't, and you just couldn't possibly see them.
Thanks. Dave, in one of the slides you put up, you talked about the MPO adopting recommendations. And I noted up on top, it says mayors, city councils. Why would we not want to take it to that level as well?
Oh, no, we can. I was just putting it in the context of what we were doing here.
Okay.
There was a number of different organizations that they mentioned in the SS4A slide. I just highlighted the MPO to show our significance of bringing it up here.
Thank you.
Yes. On one of the slides, it's shown the fatality rate, national fatality rate bottoming out at 2013, and then showing a constant increase since then. Any thoughts as to why the change?
My thought in terms of why it bottomed out there would be the recession.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's bottomed out because of the recession, and then why is it climbing up? It's all those factors, including the cell phone. In 2013 is about when actually that's probably when I think I got my first smartphone. So, yeah, that's,
all your fault.
yeah, yeah.
And also for someone who's spent 16 years or so traffic counting on the side of the road, the number of people who are looking down at their laps when they drive by you is staggering. And it's not
Yeah.
teenagers, it's people of all ages.
Come with me and stand on the Bridge City Bridge where you can watch people drive right at you and just the amount of people that are, they got straightaways, so they look down, they're doing something.
Yeah.
Watch what they're watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even the people that have fixed, I've been behind people that have fixed handheld devices that are playing a video of some sort of their FaceTiming. And even it's somewhat at eye level, but if you're looking this way, you're not looking that way. And then it only takes a second for something funny.
That's the bridge I bike over to get here.
Yep.
Every day. Or
One more question in house and we'll go.
Does any of this information had any impact on what's taught in driver training classes?
That I definitely cannot speak to. I do know that one thing I learned about driver training is that during the pandemic, there was a period of time where there was no on-road observation. So
What's that?
that means that it was all online. You never sat in a car with a driving instructor. Yes. It wasn't very long, but it was long enough that, there's a cohort of 19-year-olds now that when they learned, they didn't learn in the car with anybody else. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Turn into virtual audience. Any questions? Online? Dave and Zach, tremendous amount of information. Thank you. Is that information going to be available to us? The slideshow available?
The slideshow will be on our website sometime this week. The PDF already exists. We'll just have that website.
Thank you.
Chair, we just note that we introduced the draft targets this month and had a great discussion. Next month, this will be back on the agenda and we will ask for adoption of those targets next month.
Thanks, Nate. Any other business coming before MPO? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn MPO. Favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, call the order of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission for December 17th. There's no edits to the minutes. I'll take a motion for action on the minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
Sylvia.
All right.
take it away.
I have a question for you, Phil. Do we want to break 5 minutes?
Sure, there's more food.
There's more food out there and we're gonna bring Austin up, so maybe in that transition before I go through that. Or do you want me to go through it and then we break?
No, we'll break and then, why don't we do that? We'll break and then
All right, let's do a break.
do a roll call when we get back.
Yeah, let's,
5 minutes.
5 minutes, please. Yeah, okay.
It was at night.
That really was exciting. You said it was good.
I told you. Come on.
When I was teaching,
Great.
value was in the one. That's what it was. They had
So much.
I better read something.
Yeah, you want
Take
to-
5 minutes.
Never really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, when you're going up a hill, you're expecting there to be.
So 0 is the goal.
Yeah.
And what we working towards is actually.
Yeah, I wasn't. I mean, yeah.
In a state actually. So, you know, but
Yeah, it's like they in cars.
Maybe you need less emphasis on maintenance.
Right.
But,
So,
but I was no serious. Every time I got hit before, I was on.
our targets this year. Are doing to get to that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought it was interesting, it said this automatic enforcement.
It's actually from.
Oh.
I don't think my site. Yeah.
Video everyone.
Yeah, I think it's like. There's a little bit, it's got a little bit front.
I get where you can get hit, like TV, you got a panel kitchen, you know,
Yeah, no, the attention. I mean, one of the things that's strict
We
design,
achieved that target.
right, making sure that, one of the things I noticed is that I've been this year, I'm on Fulton Street, I'm crossing all the time. And if someone's going 20 miles per hour, and you start walking, but then people are going, people are like 35, 40 miles per hour there, and you start walking, they might.
It's a combination. That's an application. It's not, you know, it's an action. It doesn't have-
I should remember all
Take
the-
law.
And a lot of it is, it's like. There is. Slow down.
Difference.
Now, go fast.
Sorry,
They take commercials. I was like,
Coming across Grand Street, take a left, you got no light to get to Brook.
I feel like it's basically a big parking lot. It's like I'm going.
It's a combination.
You're parking there, you're getting out.
Federal highway.
I agree with you. I think that's that I agree.
Yeah.
The National Highway
I think
Traffic.
that, I mean, I think it was part of like the Army area.
So it is a partnership
Kind of
between those
redesign
agencies.
or.
Highways.
It's just, it's running a.
It's, the data has to be, but I. I think somebody needs to be, so, the interesting state behind it, people kind of just, we certainly do have, you know, the case of safety department. The data in the speech is going down that much, but I believe.
Part of that conversation.
Discussion that
I think it's different, the data showing it's down, dying significantly. The other thing now, though, is we
We always
know.
throw it fast as our.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all the time, I'm like, man, awesome. I think that up there, kind of close to things.
The next week, like, my brother was a fighter.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That'll be good. Yeah, that's why I think.
Well, we were.
I don't think noticed. They narrowed it. They would have, I'll tell you, it's just.
Are we ready?
Yeah, they are.
It's on here.
Where?
People are back.
All right.
It's not exactly the same.
I figured it was gonna be easier to just send it along.
Yeah.
Space.
Oh.
Yeah.
1 minute. Give a 1 minute warning.
Looks good?
Yep.
All right.
He doesn't swing in that.
All right, let's just see if we go to share. There it is. So you're all good. Should I just bring
Yeah,
it
I was
up?
gonna say you can just put it up now.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Want to make it presentation?
Yeah. Do all that.
Yeah, I mean, you did it for many.
Ask our phone viewers.
All right, you're gonna, ready for roll call? Okay.
I'm ready.
I'd like to go again, Sylvia, roll call and action.
All right, let's start with Auburn, Chris Sterndale.
Aye.
And from Bedford, Bill Jean.
Present, yes.
Mark Snyder,
Yes.
and from Candia, Ron Labrador,
President, yes.
from Chester, Andrew Huddick,
President, yes.
Deb Munson, President, yes. Deerfield, Fred McGarry,
President and yes.
from Derry in-house, we have Richard Tripp,
President, yes.
and online, thinking Jeff Moulton.
You're in yes.
Thanks, Jeff. From Francistown in-house, we have Gary Schneckenberg,
President and abstain.
and online, Jen Vadney.
Present and yes.
Thank you. Goffstown online, we have, Jacob LaFontaine,
Present and abstain.
Colleen Mayu,
Present and yes.
Colleen, and Londonderry online, we have Deb Levins,
Present and yes.
House Art Ruggs.
I'm here and yes on the minutes, Brian Battaglia, I think it's on,
Oh, and Brian Battaglia.
Yep, present and abstain.
Manchester Peter Capano,
President and yes.
and Ray Clement,
Here, yes.
Dan O'Neill,
Aaron, yes.
Eliza Augusta,
Yes.
Kevin Shepherd,
Here, yes.
all right, and New Boston in-house with Mark Sunan,
Here and yes.
Ellen Campbell,
Here and yes.
from Wyndham, Peter Griffin,
Here and abstain.
and Ed LaPointe,
Here and yes.
and online we have PJ Withy.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, we're gonna make Deb Munson an honorary Manchester person. She's got the Chester already, that part of it, so.
Need the man in you, Deb. Thank you for that. New business, on to new business. We have a presentation information, only for hazard mitigation planning programs, and we have a guest here today, Austin Brown, who's the Chief of Mitigation and Recovery from the New Hampshire Homeland Security Emergency Management. Austin has a PowerPoint for us and presentation. Thank you.
All set.
You go.
Okay.
You're ready.
I'm gonna stand up and get out of here since there's a wireless mouse. Please. That way I'm back to the entire time. So good morning. As I said, so my name is Austin Brown. I'm the Chief of Mitigation Recovery. I work for New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I work for the state of New Hampshire. I do not work for the federal government. I do not work for the federal Department of Homeland Security. I'd just like to kind of add that disclaimer right up front. Here to talk about some of the programs that I have within my area of responsibility within our division, specifically the hazard mitigation programs. So today going to give kind of just a general overview of what mitigation is, how we look at mitigation, planning efforts that go into hazard mitigation, specifically at the state level, and then obviously how locals end up utilizing that. Highlight some grants that are available and talk about the application process for some of those grants, highlight some different project examples, and then share with you some different recommended resources that are available. So what is hazard mitigation? So the way we look at hazard mitigation is any action taken to reduce or eliminate long-term risk. And then when we look at hazard mitigation planning, it's looking at those risks or the processes used by the state and local governments to then identify risks and vulnerabilities associated with natural disasters, and then take those risks that are identified to develop mitigation strategies, which are then used to eliminate those and or reduce those long-term risks. Excuse me, Austin. This is Cam Perlman from the commission. Online, the slide is stuck. It looks like it's loading. I'm not sure, Sylvia, if you can help reshare the screen. Right, there we go. Oh. That better, Cam? I think so. Does anyone else online can they see this? What is mitigation slide? Okay, great.
I can see
Thanks,
it.
Austin.
Deb.
Sorry. No, you're good. Thank you. Okay, so I always like to put this slide first just because, again, people think mitigation differently compared to the way our program works. So just some different kind of concepts relative to what is mitigation and some of the different eventually types of projects that we can do. So burying overhead power lines. So this is an example of a mitigation action that we can take. Elevating in a home in a repeated flood area. Absolutely. Repeated damages, our goal is to eliminate those. Pre-treating roads before a snow event. No, that's not something that we can help you pay for because it's not long-term. Implementing warning systems, so emergency activation systems, tornado sirens. This is something that we can do. And we have a project in the pipeline right now. We're doing some lightning detection systems. So again, just different types of warning systems. Repairing storm damage. No. Ultimately, those efforts have to be done as part of different processes. So going to dive into mitigation planning. So obviously, the commission here helps a lot with different communities' efforts relative to local hazard mitigation planning. So FEMA says every community should have one of these plans. It's not a requirement to have these plans. And once you have a local hazard mitigation plan, FEMA recommends that they need to be updated every 5 years. So that really is kind of the burden that gets put on communities, is that it's not a set it on the shelf and forget it. There has to be that continual work that gets put into them. The other kind of big thing along with that is once your plan is approved and adopted, making sure that you're continuing to work on it. So that way throughout those 5 years, you're showing progress towards the actions or strategies that you've included within your plan. So again, it's not we went through the process of creating one and you're sticking it up on the shelf and saying, okay, we'll see in 5 years, we're here to do it again. So this is a map. We get one of these every month from FEMA.
We're not getting the slides either, again.
Oh my gosh. Anybody have an idea, Zach or? Maybe just leave it in. Do you see the map now?
Yes.
We do. Yep.
Right, advance it one and see if they see the next one. Are you
Yep.
seeing?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
What on earth?
Okay. That's okay. Technology, what is it? It's our best friend. Said nobody ever. Okay, so this map is a map that we get every month from FEMA. Again, maps are much better representation to be able to just kind of show people what it is at the entire state level. Obviously, again, Plan Commission kind of there really in the middle. And for us, this is a good indicator for us just planning wise as we move through our funding strategies across the different programs to understand where communities are at. Are they close to having their plan expire? Or are they not close to having their plan expire? So the majority of that light blue color that you see, which is the majority of our communities right now, they're approved not expiring within 1 year. So obviously that's a good thing to see. We want to see more of that light blue. Talk a little bit about the planning timeline. And this really comes into when we talk about engagement at the local level, how much time goes into these plans. We're really, and I'll talk about it here in a couple different slides, starting to become much more proactive in regards to how we're funding these through some of the programs that we have down to the local level. But what happens is we end up reaching out several years in advance of a community's plan actually expiring. So the reason for that is because of this slide right here. So we want to make sure that a community's plan never expires. The reason for that is because FEMA has requirements for certain programs that if you have an expired plan, you're not able to access their programs. So we have to kind of run that sweet spot of trying to make sure that you at the local level have enough time to be able to do your update, meet FEMA's requirements, throw in potentially the curveball of them updating the guidance somewhere in there too, and actually having an approved and adopted plan within really the 3 years, which is the period of performance of the grants that we provide. So as you can kind of see right from the very beginning, it all starts with that notice of funding opportunity. And then really, as we move throughout the entire process, this is where the meat and potatoes happens of actually the work within the plan, which you can see here is really within kind of that year 2 to year 3 phase. All of these have to go through governor and council. They're all issued grant agreements. A lot of times that becomes a very lengthy process because it's just out of our control in regards to how they move through the process. So we're often trying to communicate with communities to get documentation back as efficiently as we can to make sure that you, again, really don't chew through a lot of that time on the front end or the back end through just the administrative portions. So what happens is, again, you write the plan and then it really goes through kind of a back and forth process. Once the planners think that the plan is in a good spot after they've kind of gone through all of the work to get it to kind of an initial review, gets sent to our office. From there, we have a state planner that works with the planning commissions or private contractors to kind of do a cursory review before it gets sent to FEMA, have some exchange back and forth. If anything needs to be worked on, we send it back. If we think it's good to go, we kind of push it into FEMA's queue. FEMA right now has the approval authority for the state of New Hampshire. So their planners are the ones that go through and ultimately use a review tool and look at the plans that the community makes to kind of overall say yay or nay to the contents of the plan. But we're seeing that process is going a lot better. But as you can see, it kind of goes back and forth or can go back and forth. We're seeing that a lot of these can move through pretty quickly now, which is obviously beneficial. So state of New Hampshire, we also have a plan. These are the different types of hazards that we talked about in our plan. Obviously, a pretty wide variety: avalanches, coastal flooding, inland flooding, drought, earthquakes, extreme heat to landslides, lightning to wildfires. Again, obviously, we get a cover from the seacoast to the inland western portion of the state, and then also to the northern border too. Obviously, how communities talk about this is completely different. One of the ones that I always like to highlight in the middle, high hazard potential dams. It's actually just reading a story that was sent to me relative to the number of high hazard dams that we have here in the state of New Hampshire, one of the highest in the entire country. So for us, a lot of that falls to state DES because the state actually owns a good portion of those, but some of those are locally owned as well. The High Hazard Potential Dam Program, we'll talk about that grant program through FEMA, but also another great program if you do have high hazard dams in your communities to try and take advantage of. The other one too that I always like to say is it's kind of a weird one that it's thrown in there now because people are like, but solar storms and space weather. If you haven't looked at a local plan, I would encourage you to, and especially the solar storms and space weather sections. They're very interesting how they're addressed through the plans.
These are all natural.
Correct.
But are there any things like terrorism or human related?
So FEMA considers those technological hazards. FEMA does not require technological hazards to be included within the plans. Certainly you as a community can include whatever you want within your plan. As far as FEMA's review, they really care about this.
Very briefly, would you explain to us what constitutes a high hazard dam?
So I'll hit that on another slide.
Okay.
There's a nice
All right.
graphic that'll do way better justice than me trying to explain it now.
Well, it's simple. Right.
Yeah, graphics are way better. So we're going to talk about really kind of three overarching programs. I lump it into kind of two different areas: disaster and then non-disaster programs. So disaster is our hazard mitigation grant program. So again, we've been full of disasters over the last year. So every time we get a presidentially declared disaster, the state also gets access to the hazard mitigation grant program. Completely different pot of funding. And I'll talk about how it's funded here in a minute. But this is kind of one of those other things that every time it rains and pours and we get another disaster, there becomes another pot of funding available to communities to be able to do mitigation type projects. The non-disaster side of the house are BRIC and FMA. So BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, and then Flood Mitigation Assistance. These two programs are much more of the traditional grants, notice of funding opportunity based. They run kind of a traditional grant cycle. There's no like surprise gotcha moment, except for like right now with BRIC. So, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Eligible sub-applicants. So again, who can apply to these programs? Typically, again, we work with local communities. The curveballs that kind of get thrown in there, some private nonprofit organizations, typically in like the conservation sector, can apply directly. But a lot of the times, the communities are the ones that really kind of drive the ship in regards to being able to access these. Homeowners and individuals, again, really the curveball there. We'll talk about the FEMA Swift Current Program and the flood mitigation assistance. Those are really the most complex in regards to access, because again, it's meant for a homeowner to be able to elevate their own property. Obviously, town has no responsibility for that, but the town really is the one that has to facilitate that application process to FEMA on the homeowner's behalf. The homeowner has no ability to access the program through the federal government without the assistance of the community. So that becomes interesting to navigate. Eligible activities, obviously, you can kind of see here they're split up amongst the 3 different kind of program areas. A lot of different things that you can think about. And again, kind of go back to that previous slide in regards to the different types of hazards that can be addressed, and then how these types of projects fit into those types of hazards. For us right now, really the big ones that we're seeing are flood risk reduction measures. So increasing the size and flow of culverts, going from a traditional like 36-inch culvert to an open bottom box culvert. In a lot of places, though, that is really kind of one of the most traditional things that we're seeing. A lot of floodproofing and some of those types of things. I'm trying to think about what else.
Safe room construction,
Am I?
safe room construction.
Safe room construction is not one we deal with here. Safe room construction is not for your guns. It is for really like tornadoes and those types of things. So it's really not.
Not like in the movies.
Yeah, yeah.
So as far as the culverts, is it the size the issue or the fact they're not maintained, they're not cleared on a regular basis?
Yes.
Thank you. You're so succinct.
So, for us, in Chester, culverts is a big issue.
Yep.
Because the picture on the left, you know, that could, to replace that could be $200,000.
Yeah.
Picture on the right, I've got 2, I just received estimates for the 1.2 million apiece.
Yeah.
Small towns like Chester cannot afford that when you have 6 to 8 of them that need to be done that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and natural bottom culvert, it's not sustainable. The end result is that they don't get done.
Yeah.
So how can a town like ours receive aid?
Yeah, so I'll talk about kind of process and strategy here in a minute. The other activity that I want to highlight just before I kind of move to the next slide is project scoping. Project scoping is really the other big one that we're trying to push right now. Because what I'm trying to do at the programmatic level as we're administering this program is create a pipeline. Because really the project scoping, we know there's a big cost right up front to be able to create those initial design plans, figure out the permitting. Does archaeology need to get involved? State Historic Preservation Office get involved? All of those different kind of stops along the way, even to just get ready to actually put a shovel in the ground to make one of these things to get to that $1.2 million cost. There's that cost on the front side. So we try to help out as much as we can too on the project scoping side to be able to come up with the plans and be as close to shovel ready as what we can. And then again, really the other aspect is obviously planning activities. We can pay for hazard mitigation planning type activities under several of our programs. Obviously, that's how we fund communities to be able to do their local hazard mitigation plan updates. Yep, go ahead.
I just had a question on the structural retrofitting of buildings and facilities. Does that apply to, you know, like, for example, could it apply to a school because it's used as an emergency shelter, or?
Yeah, so that would be, again, there would have to be that like critical infrastructure piece denoted to it, or again, like the schools used as a primary shelter for a community, or like there's got to be kind of that elevated risk factor associated with it. Obviously, we can't just go in and any town-owned building for the most part, just kind of say, yeah, we need to do this. There
In
needs
a
to
lot
be
of small towns, that's what they use.
Exactly. Yeah. So like right now we have we're one of the kind of a different project, but the generators, we're working on trying to do a generator project right now for a local DPW shed. Again, doesn't have a current generator for the facility, but again, in order for them to be able to get out, if they don't have the ability to open the doors, to take care of the roads or those types of things. So working on like generator access. So again, you kind of have to just get creative with how the narrative goes along with whatever project is. So funding and cost share. So this kind of starts the conversation throughout the rest of the presentation in regards to how we help. So our funding for most of these programs is 75-25. So meaning federal government provides 75%, 25% is then provided by the community. We have had a few disasters in the past. Obviously, COVID kind of changed the way feds did business for a couple of years. They increased some cost shares to 90-10 for a couple of years. So obviously, if you were kind of in the market and were able to get in projects during that time frame, or even doing planning updates during that time frame, it would obviously was much more advantageous to be able to do business because the local share was much less burdensome. The other one that kind of gets dicey in regards to different types of Fed shares is flood mitigation assistance. Also within that program is the FEMA Swift Current program. The Fed shares changed based on the types of historical damages to the facility and really based on their NFIP status. And then the bottom one down there is HHPD. That's the high hazard dam program. It has a 65-35 split. So why is the local plan important? So again, I kind of hit on this earlier. In order to be able to apply for some of these programs, you have to have a local hazard mitigation plan fully approved by FEMA. So again, formally approved plan at the time of obligation is only for HMGP, and then the rest of them, it has to be at the time of application and the time of award. What I'll say is FEMA understands that typically there's barriers in the way of communities having non-expired plans. So at least in the past, we've seen the NOFOs for BRIC and FMA, even Swift Current as well, allow for an extraordinary circumstances request to be put in. So that way you could still file an application if you were within a couple months of being able to have an approved plan in the next several months. So it didn't necessarily create a hard stop roadblock for communities being able to apply. And then obviously the other one down there at the bottom, NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, in order to be eligible for flood mitigation assistance in Swift Current, your community has to be a participating member of NFIP. The grant process, again, really just shows that it's nonstop process. So you're continuing to go round and round. And this can really be applied in many different ways. This goes to your project scopings. This goes to all of those shovel-ready projects. This goes to your planning activities that as soon as you finish one, you're on to the next because you have 6, 7, 8 lined up behind it. And you're just in this constant state of moving through this process. So I think this graphic does a really good job of highlighting that. So talk about some of the different programs in a little bit more detail now. So HMGP, so Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, also known as 404 Mitigation. So this is what happens after we get a presidentially declared disaster. So this is that pot of money that we get specifically because we get a disaster. So FEMA will fund based on really what the total anticipated dollar value is of the damages for the disaster. Typically, New Hampshire sees disasters really kind of run between $5 and $10 million. So we're always in that first category there on the top, up to $2 billion. Our percentage that FEMA uses to calculate our ceiling is always 15%. Obviously, if we were to have a higher dollar value disaster, our percentage would decrease. More recently, FEMA has kind of taken some feedback from states, local communities, tribes, et cetera, relative to the period of performance not being long enough, and or it's what I say, FEMA's process sometimes being too cumbersome for communities to navigate. They've extended the period of performance. It was 36 months. They've now extended it for disasters moving really from August this year forward. It's now 48 months. Really, that's good for us because our application window is a year after it opens. So it allows us some planning time to be able to kind of get communities put into the pipeline without burning down your candle of how long you actually have to do the work for whatever the project is. So again, talked a little bit about BRIC earlier. So again, this is notice of funding opportunity based. Really our available funding is based on that. We'll talk a little bit about BRIC 24 here in a minute. So that's the upcoming round. Eligible parties and activities, again, same thing. State, local communities are eligible to apply for this. And again, the cost share match is typically the 75-25%. The one thing of note relative to the city of Manchester, under the BRIC program, FEMA has create programs to create programs. There is the community disaster resiliency zones. So in the state of New Hampshire, there's 2 locations within the state of New Hampshire that have those. There's one really between Hampton and Seabrook. That's what I say. It's in the marsh on the backside. And then the other one is really in the city of Manchester down by the mill yard. We kind of asked FEMA, how did these places come into existence? And there's still really no good reason as to why these places came into existence. We asked questions of like, what infrastructure was there that you denoted kind of put this at this kind of increased risk level? The good thing for that is those areas allow for communities to access a higher Fed share. So any projects done within those areas allow for a 90-10 federal share cost. We're expecting to continue to see that program kind of morph over time. And like I said, right now, state of New Hampshire only has 2 of those. So we're still trying to navigate the waters, even with headquarters, how it works. So this is where I talk about kind of how we're utilizing our funding, again, especially with the BRIC program. So how we've been utilizing BRIC funding in the past. So BRIC 23 is what the application cycle occurred earlier this year. Application deadline for us was February of this past year. And BRIC 24, we were actually anticipating that there was a funding opportunity to come out the beginning of October this year. Because of Helene and Milton, FEMA headquarters decided to punt the drop of the notice of funding opportunity. We're now anticipating to see it kind of come at any point after the holidays. So we really are kind of at behold of FEMA kind of just providing that date. What we've seen, at least in the years past, 2 different areas in regards to funding. They provide a statewide allocation of, at least this past year, was $2 million that the state could use. It was guaranteed, not competitive funding that we didn't have to go up against another state. Really, the goal of those is capability and capacity building. So again, think project scoping. So we'll talk about some of the projects that we put in for that. And then really the other thing that we work on funding underneath BRIC is our local hazard mitigation plans. We've taken a strategic approach away from utilizing the hazard mitigation grant program for a few different reasons: programmatic delivery, communication with our different partners at FEMA. We just know that, again, because this has been a steady stream of funding, we're just moving away from having to rely on a program that may or may not pop up to be able to fund communities' plans. So again, really what we're trying to encourage now, aside from the plans, is to be able to work on putting in project scoping applications. I'm not going to beat on flood mitigation assistance too much. Again, this is not a program that is overutilized in the state. Again, it's NOFO based. Again, emphasis is really on repeated flood damages to buildings. Our big push as of late has been the Swift Current program. I'll talk about that in one of the next slides. And again, just to highlight, 220 of 234 jurisdictions currently participating in NFIP. So at least in regards to initial barriers, that typically is not a barrier for communities to access the program. Swift Current, this is a new program that at least we learned about last year, was our first activation. So this happens because of a severe storm and or flooding type disaster. FEMA puts this special pot of funding aside and says, well, not only do you get your HMGP money because you got a disaster, now we're giving you money in this pot called Swift Current to be able to specifically do the types of activities that were previously covered underneath FMA. So think again, your retrofitting, floodproofing, and your acquisitions and elevations. So really our big push has been on elevations because again, we know that really the appetite more commonly than not within the state is there's no room for doing acquisitions. So this is really again activated after a flooding related disaster. And again, the cost share is variable property to property. We've seen properties have 100% Fed share, where there's been no responsibility to the community and or the homeowner, and going down to that 75% amount. And again, FEMA looks at it individually based on each one. So right now, we have an activation open, and I'll highlight the funding of that later on. We'll go back to your question about dams. This is one of the charts that we use when we actually submit our applications. So the high hazard potential dam program is really unique in how it's suited within kind of just even the state government and even how the program is administered by FEMA. So it's kind of like the ugly stepchild of mitigation because it's really administered by the National Dam Safety Program, NDSP, but is suited underneath mitigation because really you're mitigating a natural hazard, which is caused by flooding because of the risk of the dams. So we rely on the DES Dam Bureau a lot. Steve Doyle and Corey Clark, we work with them all the time in regards to this program because we merely administer the grant flowing in and out of the state. We're not the dam specialists in regards to how they work, how they function, et cetera. So we rely on their expertise, especially when it comes to being able to actually like create the classification of what is a high hazard dam, what is not a high hazard dam. But this is the really one of the main kind of plots that they use to be able to indicate what is a high hazard. So again, no different than what you would expect. Population at risk, they use a range. It's just a sliding scale and they just plot. So again, likelihood of failure, so same thing. So based on whatever the value is there, whatever the value is here, it kind of just gets plotted across, and you'll see if it gets plotted anywhere within the red, either a high or very high for likelihood of failure condition, especially based on population, it's not that difficult to end up in a high hazard situation. Does that answer?
Actually, the reason I asked that question is because I have a decade or so ago, experience with a dam and the restoration. At that time, it seems to me the classification of a high hazard is a dam that if it fails could result in loss of life. That's what I expected to hear.
Yeah, so and it really can even just be based off of buildings. So we had a situation last week with just even the flooding that we had. I got a call, I was on call last week, and it was for a potential dam failure notification in a community up north. I go in, pull up the emergency action plan because they're required to have some sort of plan for the high hazard dams, and I go in and look at it. The main reason it was classified as a high hazard dam, there were several buildings just downstream of the dam that would see a foot of inundation if the dam were to have a failure. So obviously meaning that any of those buildings could have been populated because they would have been inundated. It's enough to trigger their mechanism based on its condition, and then obviously population in the area. But again, lots of different factors that go into it. But really our big emphasis here, repair, removal, structure, non-structural rehabilitation. The big thing with this, just to throw it as kind of a caveat, the dam portion of a local hazard mitigation plan is not required. So you can get a plan approved without the dam section being included within it. However, in order to be able to access this program through FEMA, you must have the dam section within the local hazard mitigation plan completed and approved by FEMA. So just something to be thinking about as you're working through your plan update process, especially if you have high hazard dams, to be making sure that you're including this if you're potentially looking at utilizing grant funding down the road. So talk a little bit about application components. Really the big thing for us is kind of start at the basics: description, scope of work, budget estimates, again, trying to figure out how the match is being met, timeline and schedule, alternate actions and proposed decision process. So again, alternate actions typically means FEMA looks for 3 different activities. And then really coming down to it being project dependent, so working on the BCA. And FEMA's changed the way that they do the BCA, meaning communities are able to just go through the process if it's under $1 million to be able to just complete a narrative. And FEMA's actually able to assist you with that. So the BCA typically was pretty scary for people being able to apply and access mitigation funding, and they've created an opportunity for it to be less burdensome. Just talk about some recent awards. And again, this presentation will be provided to you so you can look at some of these. But again, just some of the money that's going out the door. We're north of $5 million just over the last several months in hazard mitigation grant funding, nearly at $1.5 million under BRIC 23, and we just got a $6.5 million award for HSEM. So lots of mitigation projects moving in and throughout the state right now. And then just there's a case study in here as well. Not going to cover that now, again, just for the essence of time, but just kind of threw in some information here. It was elevation of a facility to prevent flooding. So it was their sole only access into a treatment facility plan. And included some pictures in here that are, these are the before pictures and then what it looks like now. So just a great picture. Highlight some of the different funding that's out there. Again, right now we have 20 million for SWIFT. We're kind of moved through most of that application process. We have 5 open HMGPs right now, and we're waiting for BRIC 24 to kind of come at any point. So lots of opportunities. Information on how to submit the letter of intent, you can find it on our website. Again, all of these links will be active in the email that goes out to you, so you can just click on it. But obviously our shared inbox email is there. Feel free to send us an email. And then there's a whole bunch of trainings and different resources here at the end. I always like to just throw out because can be pretty complicated to move through a lot of these programs. So just try to share some of that information too. And then a different training program as well. But that's it.
Austin, thank you. Sylvia, is you available to?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
in the respect for everyone's time, any real quick questions for Austin while he's here? Thank you very much.
I'll leave some.
Sure appreciate you coming out. Now everybody's busy around this time of year. Thank you so much.
Any other business?
No. Okay, yes.
So, as you know, last month we noted that, the Regional Planning Commission is updating the regional comprehensive plan. And, this month and over the next few months, we're working on updating the existing conditions summaries that were found in the 2015 plan. Once we're done with that, we're going to be putting together a presentation on where we are as a region. As part of that presentation, we want to couple it with a focus group discussion about the key issues affecting the region. And so this announcement is really just a heads up notice that in the coming 2 or 3 months, we're going to be looking to invite you and others from your community to participate in a focus group discussion looking at each of the 9 topic areas covered by the comprehensive plan. And we're thinking about some different ways to break up the groups. Zach had mentioned the Manchester towns larger than 10,000, towns less than 10,000. Might do something like that, or if you guys have ideas about other ways to break up topic areas, but I just wanted to give that announcement, and we will be following up in the next month or 2 with more details and requests for participation from new members of your community.
Thanks, James. Public comment period, commissioner insights, any other than wishing you all very safe and happy holiday season. Any other comments from commissioners? Online? Seeing none, I'll promotion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody. Thanks so much.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
And 2.